about OT Stories. I am Wendy, your host, and today we are speaking with Alex. Thank you so much, Alex, for coming on. I'm so excited to hear about your topic.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. I really
Absolutely.
appreciate it, and I am so thrilled to be able to share with you the topic that I've researched. This is going to be our podcast today is going to be talking about occupational therapy and how it's integrated into ABA. And for those of you who don't know, that's Applied Behavioral Analysis Therapy. This is used particularly for those with autism or other developmental delays.
And so, why is this topic meaningful? Why did you pick this topic?
Yeah, so before coming into occupational therapy, I worked with children on the spectrum, and I was a registered behavioral therapist. I really just fell in love with it, and that's also kind of how I found out about occupational therapy, and I hope to maybe get back into that field one day soon.
Oh, that sounds great. You know, I think if you always have experience with things, I think that drives your passion. And what is the saying? If you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. And, you know, playing with children, while it just looks like your play, there's a lot of reasoning behind it. And there's a lot, you know, that we talk about in pediatrics class, and how it's really focused on meeting goals and stuff like that. But since children's main occupation is play, that's what we have to focus on. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to hear what you found out on this topic.
Yes, ma'am. It's something, like I said, it's something super passionate for me. I was actually really intrigued just going through the research and finding some benefits of occupational therapy throughout children that are on the spectrum. So some topics that I really wanted to touch today was, what OT is and ABA and how they complement each other, types of interventions that us as occupational therapists provide in that ABA setting, how we use therapeutic use of self to build strong connections with clients, and then how we upgrade and downgrade our interventions to promote engagement, adaptation, and overall success.
Oh, love it, love it, love it. That's going to be great. Yeah. I think the best thing I feel that we have in our toolbox as OTPs, is therapeutic use of self. And I think that people often don't know what that is. And can you just describe it in your own words? What is therapeutic use of self?
Yes. So when you're using that therapeutic use of self, I really think it just means using your personality. So who you are as an occupational therapist, and using that in your therapy with your clients. So for me, I believe that I have a strong suit in empathy. And so I feel like I can be very empathetic with my clients, understanding their situation and how they are, and their circumstances that they're coming from, and then also integrating my communication styles to just build that trust and rapport with my clients. Now, as far as in an ABA setting, it can look like using playful and excited tones to engage a child in therapy. And then also just being patient and adapting my approaches based on the child's mood or sensory needs. Really just kind of reading the room and reading my client, understanding where they may be coming from and what they are comfortable with.
And and I think yourself, your personality really lends itself. Like, I would like to see you on a bad day, because every time I see you, you have a smile in your face and a step in your walk, a bounce in your walk. I don't know what the right word is there, but always just happy-go-lucky. So when you have a bad day, you let me know, because I would like to see what that looks like, because there are some days where it's just like, ugh. But for me, I think that you really hit the nail on the head. It's using yourself as a tool to help connect that patient to whatever your outcome is, whatever that is, and how are you that conduit to getting the goal that you want to get. So works really well. So, okay, I'm going to let you get started here.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you, Dr. Heine. I appreciate the wonderful, kind words. So, yeah, we can kind of just dive in, what is OT and how it's integrated into ABA.
Okay.
So, looking at ABA therapy, they focus on understanding and modifying the behavior by using reinforcements. It's used with individuals on the autism spectrum, as I previously mentioned, to help.
It can be used with other populations.
I did not know that.
Okay.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, anybody who has, primarily, yes, it is.
Okay.
However, there are some children that have sensory issues, right? And so that can present as like a medical condition, because it is a medical condition, but it's not just specifically. So it can be anybody who has behavioral challenges, because I think I have a couple of kids that do not have. And so it's behavioral, right?
Okay.
It's behavioral training is basically what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, okay, sorry to step in there.
No, I appreciate that, because it's interesting. In my research, I did not see any of that.
Really?
I only saw that it was used for children on the autism spectrum. So I would love to maybe pick your brain about it.
Absolutely.
And see some more insight about that.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, like Dr. Heine said, just, a broad reach of people that it can reach, and things of that nature. Now, on the other hand, occupational therapy focuses on helping people participate in meaningful activities, or quote unquote occupations. This could be anything from getting dressed to eating to playing and socializing with one another. Together, they help individuals bridge that gap between learning a skill and using it in your daily life.
Yeah, and it's funny because the age-old question keeps coming up. Well, I go into an evaluation. What is occupational therapy? I don't work anymore. And I said, we're not just about putting people to work. And I think that's a huge frustration on my part, because we see it so much. Our profession's been around for over 100 years. You would think that we could bridge that gap and people know, but no, people only know PT. So it's really frustrating, when we have to explain and try to justify, as an assistant, you won't have to do that because your OT, your supervising OT will have already done that. But I do find that it is very challenging as an OT, number one, to have people, and I think with the geriatric setting, it's much different than the pediatric setting. Pediatric setting, parents are generally knowledgeable about what OT is, and that may be an episode for the future. The difference between geriatric and pediatrics, as far as that goes, OT is very, very well known in the pediatric world, but they're not necessarily in the geriatric. PT is the leader in that. And why is that? Right? We can help individuals with everything. So I feel like that's really a big problem in our profession.
For sure. And just advocating for us as OTs and OTAs and making sure that we are being that voice of reason. I think also, as far as researching it goes, occupational therapy only just recently became a part of ABA. And, there's a lot of controversy against ABA. Does it work? Does it not work? Knowing that it probably is going to be around for much longer than most of us might think. Occupational therapy really is just using that, and we're like, okay, let's just dive in. Let's see how we can benefit the client and work together as a team.
I did not know that there is some controversy about whether it works or not. I highly recommend it to some of my more severe kiddos. It does amazing. It takes children who have such disruptive lives and helps them be functional. So I did not know that. That's something that's new to me. So thank you definitely for bringing that to my attention, because I did not know that.
And I think where the controversy comes from is in that older population, because they're already just so set in their ways, and at that point it's like, let them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
But then that falls on the caregivers, or
Yeah.
it falls on to whoever, like I said, the caregivers who's taking care of the client, and then really that can look like them potentially falling into that danger aspect. I mean, as they get older, they can, develop more strength, and then, the capability of being able to know, hey, I can really do whatever I want to do. But that's also where occupational therapy kind of comes in, and being able to help them realize, okay, yes, but how can you do it functionally, and how you can do it independently. I think that in itself is amazing.
And I think the key word that you said is independently, because as an OT, we want our patients to be as independent as possible. And what does that look like? Now, for the individual who is severely impacted in their self-care and that kind of stuff, it's going to look a lot different. Maybe they have a spinal cord injury. That's going to look different than an individual who's had a stroke. But they are still, or maybe they had a TIA, and so that's why I always like to reiterate, as independent as they can be. That may not be that they're completely independent. It may just be that maybe they're able to dress themselves, right? Short little bitty goals. They're able to do that by themselves, right?
I'm really glad that you brought that up, because you're right. I mean, independency can look so different from anybody. It's just really situational, and I think a lot of people just kind of get this aspect that, oh, if they're independent, they can do everything on them, on their self, and they don't need mom or dad's help or their caregiver. But really, that looks different for everybody.
Absolutely.
So that's really, really good point. Thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I kind of wanted to touch back on OT and their interventions in ABA.
Okay.
I really was so interested to see how can we specifically, what do we do when we're with the client and we are presented with goals, and what does that look like in a clinical setting or whatever that is? What does OT do in ABA specifically? So some of the interventions I found were occupations. So obviously OT, occupations. Focusing on that meaningful daily activities. So for example, teaching a child to dress themselves could involve breaking the task into smaller steps. So that's going to be that downgrading. And then for upgrading, it really could just be those simple tasks that you turn complex in. And then, first putting socks on, and then shoes, and then continuing the routine as follows. The next one is really that performance skill. So these include motor, social, cognitive skills. A common intervention might be helping a child develop fine motor skills by practicing that grasp pattern with like Play-Doh, or picking up small objects with tweezers. Kind of going back on that social aspect, I've seen a lot of social groups with children on the spectrum. People are taking them out and getting them to socialize and having those meaningful conversations and knowing how to hold a conversation. I think that's really valuable as well.
Well, and I think that is a skill that most of us take for granted, because generally speaking, I guess some of us have to struggle with holding conversations with others. But specifically, children, it doesn't always come natural, especially if like in different cultures, right? So we have to be culturally aware of, kind of how things are in different cultures. And like, for example, here in America, we make a lot of eye contact. That means that you're listening to the individuals. However, in some countries, if you make eye contact, that can be seen as threatening. And so, and like in some cultures, like the women only talk with the women. And then the male is held in higher regard than the female. And so I think when you're talking about this, it's always important because, America is becoming more and more a melting pot where there's so many different cultures, especially like where I live, there's a major university and people from India are just like coming in droves to attend that college. And so it changes the dynamic of a city when you have that. We also have a whole bunch of homeless people in the city that I am. So much that it's changed things. Like the businesses have to act differently because the homeless and come in, the Indian people come in, they have big bags, stuff like that. That you wouldn't think is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And so I kind of am getting sidetracked, but back to the point of, some of the times we take for granted just simply having a conversation. And what does that look like for a kiddo who has ASD or who's on the spectrum?
No, 100%. I totally agree. I mean, you think, oh, we can just have these conversations and they can just flow and your point gets across and you're very confident with whatever you're talking about, but putting in perspective for the children and adults that are on the autism spectrum, that doesn't come so easily for them. So implementing those interventions and those opportunities where they're able to practice that, I think is so essential in just their daily living and being able to be a functional member in society for sure.
And I think that we live in a really great day and time in that our society is more accepting of individuals who are unique. And I'm not going to say different because different, I feel like has a negative connotation with it. So individuals who are unique, or maybe it's just me, I was blessed with a very great community that really was able to focus on individuals that have special characteristics. And we had a lot of children who had ASD, and my kids' school, they gave a letter jacket to an individual. He was the manager. We had an individual he was not from our community, but he was from a different community, and he would sell snow cones. And so he created his own business.
Love that.
And then there are, like I've seen TV shows, 60 Minutes, where a company, like this gentleman, this man created a car wash company, and he only hires individuals who have special needs. And it's so that you can help these individuals be productive members of society. They can earn money. They can, feel better because they're not going to always be kids. They grow up. And I think that's something that gets lost.
Oh, yeah.
Where do these kids/adults go? They're still there. But I definitely think that's definitely something I would like to talk about in the future is like, what happens when they age out of the system, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's so important that, we talk about that. I think it's such a, I wouldn't say controversial topic, but it's not spoken about enough. I think parents are looking for those resources and wanting to know more. How can I help my kid? How can I help them become, functioning members of society? How do I advocate for my child who is looking for a job, and these jobs are having these requirements, and on paper, yes, they qualify, but then they look at, oh, well, they have autism. Okay, and I think that kind of comes with a, I can't even think of the word, but stereotype, yeah, behind it. And I don't think I definitely don't think that's fair. I think there are many, many people with this diagnosis that are so incredibly smart and just need to be advocated for
yeah,
sure.
I totally agree. And the one thing I will say too is that I'm gonna back your train back up a little bit. You know, when I see an older kiddo, when I say older, I mean 11, 12, 13, right? I ask mom and dad, what's your plan for your child?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, at some point, they're not going to be in school. What's your long-term plan? And a lot of the times, they have not thought that far ahead. And I feel like it's part of my responsibility to help them transition and start thinking about, this is what my future looks like. This is what that looks like. And, you know, I just think that it's very, very important that we really have these conversations and educate parents about, these are what your options are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, who's going to be the long-term caregiver? Who's going to be the power of attorney? Because you know what? Your mom and dad are not going to be around for forever.
Right.
So what are you going to do in that regard?
Mm-hmm. And I think as occupational therapists, I think really, you know, who else is going to talk about it except us?
Yeah.
As, you know, advocates for our patients, we have to be that outlet that has all the resources in our toolbox.
That's
and
right.
Just giving that information to parents, because again, if we don't talk about it, who else will?
Yeah, because physical therapy definitely won't talk about it.
Well, you're not wrong. So, I mean, yeah, really just making sure that we are getting those kids and adults those outlets, and really just making sure that they have all the information that at least we can provide for them.
Exactly.
Moving forward. Another thing that I kind of wanted to touch base about on interventions are really just that client factor. You know, addressing those underlying physical emotions. For instance, you know, we may be helping a child regulate their emotions,
Mm-hmm.
teaching them calming techniques like deep breathing or sensory strategies, just bringing it back down and understanding, okay, like, this is the situation. I am gonna be okay. How can I self-regulate that?
I think we as adults need that too.
Oh, yeah. I totally benefit from that. Just learning about it in occupational therapy. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, you know,
It's
maybe
like
I could use it.
Deep breaths in
Yes.
through your nose, out through your mouth. Yeah, I talk about that a lot in my practice for
Mhm.
sure.
And I think we take it for granted, but I mean, it's so beneficial. I really do. I really think it helps everybody. I think everybody can benefit from occupational therapy.
Of course, absolute. Of course, you know, we're a little bit biased, but hey, you know, come
Yes,
on.
ma'am. So yeah, I mean, really just those interventions and how that looks in ABA, I found so fascinating, and would love to maybe even learn some more information about it and see how it looks in the real world, and, you know,
Mhm.
see it done by an occupational therapist in the ABA setting, and
Mhm.
learn some things. I'm all about it.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely really admire ABA therapists. I know I recently had a kiddo that I had to go to the ABA center, and it was one-on-one with this individual. I was doing the reassessment, and, you know, they were really good at being able to help that child, like, refocus and attend to the task at hand. Whereas before, when I had seen the child, they were all over the place and wasn't engaged with me. So I definitely, that was really, I think, you know, I've seen the progress from an OT perspective, but outside of being directly with them. And so this was my first time actually interacting with them.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really a very cool experience. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
So,
I really, you know, just from previous, when I was a registered behavioral therapist, gaining that connection with your client and just getting that understanding, even if your client is nonverbal, even if your client, you know, speaks through a different speaking device, you know, anything of that nature, you still can build that connection with your client, and it doesn't have to be through talk. You know, yes, you are telling them exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it, But knowing that you have that rapport is so beneficial.
Well, you can build that rapport just through eye contact. You know, I recently had an individual who had a form, not ALS, but a form of ALS, and he was nonverbal, and he was in his 50s, and he had an iPad that was a talking device, AAC, and like we built that rapport between him and I, even though he was nonverbal.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
And the AAC devices are just, oh my gosh, I could sit there and just explore them all day. They are so, they've come a long way, and they're so
my gosh,
developed.
You have no idea. You know, the interesting thing for me back in the day, right, when I first started being an OT, they had Dynabox, right?
I think we were talking about this a little bit.
And those were pre-iPads, and you could program it in, and you, like I had a patient when I worked in an outpatient clinic, they took a picture of me, and then that was part of their Dynabox, and so it would be like, they could say Miss Wendy, and you know, this kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool. You know, technology is a great thing these days for everybody. And I think that it's definitely come a long way, you know, but especially it's more affordable. I think the problem herein lies is the software that you have to buy, or the programs are like $500.
Yeah,
they're
ridiculous.
Really expensive.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've seen, you know, some parents just express that concern of like, okay, you know, we have the tablet, where do we get the software? And then leading them to, you know, buying it and downloading it, and then the hope is to use it at home before just really feeling comfortable with it, and then, you know, teaching them how to use it. But before all of that comes the price. I mean, it really does come down to it. So that looks like, you know, giving our resources of grants, scholarships of that nature, really just making sure, you know, they know that there's an opportunity to get some kind of help, because it can be pretty expensive.
Well, and I think another thing to have in your tool belt, if you're specifically working with this population, is, you know, where can you get that funding? Where can you find that so that you can provide that resource to your families? Yeah.
I mean, there's not enough time in the world to be able to just help as many kids as you want. And that's where my soft spot is the kids. I mean, I know you know that, Dr. Heidi, but exactly. I love the kids. And, you know, seeing that need for occupational therapy, whether they're getting those direct services or not, just really wanting to love on them and help them in their daily life and making their life easier. I think that's so beneficial. And, you know, if I can be that help in the child's life, and if I can advance them throughout many stages of life, I think it's just so impactful personally for me.
So what you just told me in that is that you're going to start a not-for-profit.
Oh, yep.
That's going to help. That's what I got out
That's
of that.
Exactly right, yes. Dr. Heine. I'm going to start a nonprofit, because I know.
Not-for-profit, yes.
Yes, and I know ABA therapy can be very expensive.
Exactly. So. Absolutely. There we go. Okay, so y'all heard it here first.
Yes, ma'am. So yeah, like I said, I think I would love to just know a lot more information about occupational therapy in ABA. I think, you know, I could go down a whole rabbit hole, but potentially getting that one-on-one conversation with occupational therapists who are working in ABA and seeing those experiences and talking about things, and as an OTA in the future, you know,
talk it into existence.
Yes, ma'am. And just knowing, okay, you know, there's a need, and we have to advocate for our patients, and how can we help them, especially with children that are on the autism spectrum, who don't always have somebody advocating for them. And as occupational therapists, I think, there's a great need for that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that helping people in general there's always a need for that, no matter what. The one thing I will just tell you is you can't save everybody.
I know.
And that's going to be the hardest thing, I
Yeah.
think, for you to learn, is that there are some times where we just can't make that connection. We can't help that, unfortunately. And that's a really hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
But it's an important one that we have to learn. So, I definitely think, maybe we can try to find somebody who'd be willing to come on and have a discussion about this. I don't know of any facilities right off the top of my head. I know there's several in Fort Worth, but I'm sure they're around. We could definitely get somebody who could discuss that for sure.
Yeah, and just, I think that different perspective of somebody who's been in the field and can say, here are the pros, here are the cons, and how do they advocate?
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I definitely think that's worth looking. Worth looking into and seeing. What kind of role can we play in that for sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Okay. Did you have anything else or?
Really, I just kind of wanted to wrap up all my thoughts.
Okay.
With occupational therapy and ABA, it's such a partnership. It has to be. Even occupational therapy and physical therapy, we have to work together to see the end goal and benefit our client the best we can. OT's holistic approach and ABA's structured framework combine to help clients not only learn new skills but apply them in their daily life is so crucial to our clients. If you're a parent or a caregiver considering exploring those options, like I said, maybe we can get some people to talk about that and be more advocates and collaborate in that learning aspect, and I'm always open to learning more about it. I would love to know. So, yes, ma'am.
I love everything you just said in that summary. I don't know who taught you it, but wow, that was really great.
I worked really, really hard on it, Dr. Brady.
Well, you did a great job, and I really appreciate you bringing this information to our podcast. If you have any questions, concerns, please definitely let us know. Any comments of future topics, please let me know. And otherwise, thanks for listening.